Hi there. Recently I did a video showing a little bit about how you could do custom brushes within Rebelle, and just did a quick introduction to the topic, and I said I would do a follow-up video showing a little bit more about some of the advanced features. So today I want to do a little bit more, show you some of the things that you can do using the brush creator, some of the sorts of brushes that you can make, some of the things that I use for making my own brushes. So let's see what we can do. My name is Pete. Welcome to Basement Picasso. So this was the brush that we used last time, and what I was showing you was a little bit around the brush shape and the brush dynamics and the way that it would respond to pressure and direction. Explained a little bit about the shape of the brush, and also a little bit about the grain. So today what I want to do is cover a little bit more in terms of the brush shape and show you one of the really nice features that Rebelle has in terms of the brush shapes and the way that it can interact with things. So most digital tools just tend to have a single brush shape. You select that from the shapes that you have, and then you use that to paint, and all the dynamics affect the shape. One of the really nice things that you can do in Rebelle is it allows you to use multiple shapes. So let's explore what that can do. So underneath the shape menu, you'll see that it currently says 1 of 1, which means there's one brush combination of shape and grain working together for this brush. If we hit the plus sign, you'll see it goes to 2 of 2. And what that does is it essentially just copies the last two shapes and grains. So you'll see nothing looks like it's changed. We've still got the same shape and the same grain. What we can now do is to take this shape and select something different. So in this case, I'll pick B. And you can now see that we've got A as number 1 and B as number 2. And when we start painting with that, it'll look very much like it's just painting B, that the A's disappeared. So what we'll have a look at is different ways that we can render these two brush heads. So there is this little option here on the right hand side, and that drop down menu gives you 4 options. So we've got sequential, random, pen pressure and pen tilt. So if we start with sequential, then what that means is for the total number of shapes that you've got, it will just go through each one in sequence. And you can see a little bit in the preview there. And if we just clear that layer and draw a stroke, you'll see that it is alternating between A and B sequentially. So it's doing A and then B. You can see that at the moment the A is inverted and the B isn't. So if we just make that consistent and then draw that, you'll see that that is now sequentially doing A and B as we draw the stroke. So we can continue to expand that out. If we add another image, you'll see it goes to 3 of 3. And we've now got 3 shapes, but the last one's been duplicated. So we've got A for 1, B for 2, and then B again for 3. So if I change the third one to C, we've now got A, B, and C. We'll invert that again. And because it's still on sequential for the texture order, as I rotate that round, you'll see it goes A, B, C in sequence. And we finish that off with the last one. So if we do add image, we get 4 of 4. This time I'll make it a D and invert it. And as you would probably expect, it now goes A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. So what we're getting is 4 different brush shapes in sequence as you move the brush around. You can apply all the sorts of things that we looked at last time in terms of angle, jitter, stroke direction, all those sorts of things. But what's fundamentally different is that it's now using these different shapes as it draws those lines. So that's the first way that it can render it. The next one is it can do it randomly, and that's probably fairly easy to understand. You'll get A's, B's, C's and D's in a completely random order. So it just picks one of those four and then draws any of those. So sometimes you get the same one repeated multiple times, but basically it's just completely random. So you'll get the four images and just get those in that random pattern. So that's the second one, and then the third one is the one that I tend to use for a lot of my brushes, which is the pen pressure. And what you'll see is when we do the pen pressure, down here at the bottom we've got this thing called image sequence, and what this does is map the pressure from no pressure at the left to maximum pressure at the right, and where the four brush stamps will come in and then print that particular image. So the way this is set up, we'll get A with very little pressure, and then as I put more pressure on, we'll get B, more pressure C, and then maximum pressure we'll get D. So if you see me doing a stroke from low through to high, that's full pressure giving me the letter D, and then as I take it off again, you see it went through C and B, and because it's fading out and going down in size, the A's almost disappear. So you can't really see the A's at the start, but they are there. So what this allows you to do is to get a lot of sort of variety in your overall stroke, and we'll show you how that works with different types of shapes in a couple of example brushes. So that's the shape dynamics. As you create each of those four options, for this demo so far, the grain has been the same, but you can also do some interesting things with the grain. So if we take, for example, the fourth option, D, and then put a very textured grain onto that one, what we'll now get is, as we start the stroke with our A's, then our B's, then more pressure to get C's, and then full pressure, that the D is the only one that's being influenced by that particular grain. So that grain that we applied is unique to full pressure, whereas at less pressure we're getting that consistent line. So now you get a brush that starts to respond in very different ways depending on the pressure. So you're still getting the A, B, and C and D from the pressure, but the grain for each of those different stamps can now be controlled and varied. And that allows you to get some really interesting character and quality into the brush strokes. It adds a lot more variety and gives, depending on what you do with it, a lot of randomness to what you're doing, which can make it very interesting. So that's the way that you can work with the shape dynamics. If we have a look at how we might do that and make something a bit more useful. So I'm going to go back to the ABCD shapes, and this time I'm going to pick four different brush heads. So I've got A, B, C and D, and I need to invert each of those. So I'll do that, and now what we'll get is, if we take the spacing down a little bit, we get a stroke that starts to have a lot more characteristics and interest in terms of the marks that it's starting to make. Just drop the spacing up a little bit. Because we've got the full pressure has got that grain, then we get this sort of interesting mark making it full pressure, but then at low pressure we've got this more of a sort of line characteristic. So that's the sort of thing that we would start to do. There's lots of variations you can do with this. If you do brushes that have very sort of directional marks, you can get things that will give you much more of a sort of brushed, ridged kind of quality to them. So there's a lot of flexibility that you can do with this. So if we have a look at a brush that I've made, if I just show you how it works, first of all, you'll see when I'm moving this around, we're getting all sorts of interesting things, from thick, chunky marks to little bits of text, and in between there's various sort of shapes and checkers and things. And that's coming from the fact that we've got 4 different shapes. If I cycle through them, you'll see that the shapes are different, but also the grain is different for each of these. And some of them have text in it, and some of them have grainy shapes. So the combination of all those together gives some really interesting effects, where you can just put some text down, or you can press hard and get some really thick paint, which you can then work with and blend and mix. And that adds a lot of interest and a lot of character. It's very good when you're sort of starting off painting and you just want to get lots of sort of interesting random marks down. That'll help to put things down without getting too caught up in any sort of fine detail. So that's a sort of brush that I can create using this multiple shapes and multiple grains within a single brush. The next thing we're going to have a look at is the way to do patterns and text as the grain for a brush, and how that works. So to be able to do things like that, what we'll do first of all is we'll take a brush and a bit bigger, and what we've got for this brush is a grain that has just text in it. So it's black and white text that I've copied as the grain, and it's a little bit hard to see to begin with. So what we're going to be working with is this panel down the bottom, which is the grain characteristics. So at the moment the text is quite hard to read. If I invert the grain, you'll see that the brush is now really just drawing the text, because it's the text that's white, and therefore that's what's allowing the paint to go on, whereas the black effectively masks it. And the reason you're able to see the text, so when I put my brush down and then start painting, it's painting out the text, because we have tiled grain set. So if we take that off and then move the brush around, you'll see that you can't really read the text. It's kind of applying the texture, but the grain is moving with the brush head, and therefore the text is constantly moving all over the place. So it's not really bringing out the text underneath it. It's also very small, so you probably can't really see that very effectively. So what we can do is to scale it up, and if we scale it up, then make sure it's tiled. If we scale it up and make sure it's tiled, what you should now see is that the text, which is some text that I took from Wikipedia talking about life drawing and figure drawing and modelling, we're getting that text coming through. So if we have a look at random offset, with random offset enabled, then what happens is if I paint at a point in the screen and then paint again, the text will be coming from a different point in the grain, and therefore it will start to build up on top of each other. If I take random offset off and start painting at a point on the screen and then paint at the same point on the screen, it will just continue to build up the same grain because the grain is not moving from that point on the screen. So if you want your grain to really be permanently consistent across your whole image, and you can sort of make a grain in advance that is something that you want to be able to bring in like that, then you're able to effectively paint the grain in. It almost acts like a mask at that point because it's not moving, and you can use different brushes and the text will stay in the same place. In general, that's not what I'm looking for when I do these sorts of brushes. So the first thing I would normally do is to have random offset, and that way when I paint in a little bit you'll get some text, and then when I paint back again you'll get text from a different point in the grain, and therefore it sort of builds up. The other thing that I would normally tend to do is I'll have random angle on, and what you probably see there, as you would expect, is it basically rotates the grain to a random angle and then allows you to paint in text. And that's the way I tend to use these sorts of brushes, because it's obviously more interesting when you've got text going in lots of different directions. So when you're doing these sorts of things, the shape of the brush is less important because it's really just showing and revealing the grain, and it's the grain that's doing most of the work with these sorts of things. So that kind of grain and text and the combination of the multiple brush heads is what's allowing a more complex brush like this to work, so that it's giving us thick paint when we want it, and then it's using the grain and the text to bring out the lighter parts of the stroke. So we can see now, if we go back to the shape of the grain again, we've got for very light pressure just a limited shape and a little bit of grain. For the next level of pressure, we've got some text with a few big words and a few sort of checkers and things which you can occasionally see coming through. And then for the next level of pressure, it is just that piece of text. And then the final one is back to the grain and a thick brush. That's why we get this full thick paint at that full stroke, but then as we do a little bit less pressure, we start to get all that text coming through. So that's the sort of thing that you can see. And again, if we just confirm, we go back to these, so the shapes and the grain with the text, these are the settings. It's the scale, the fact that it's tiled, the random offset and the random angle that allow those to work. So combinations of shape, grain, brush pressure and using the image sequence, all of these together allow you to build up really interesting and really complex brushes that are very good for sort of randomness and introducing interesting characteristics into the brushes. I hope that was interesting. I hope that gave you a few ideas for some of the things that you can potentially do. If you found that interesting, really appreciate if you could give me a like. If you're interested in more of these, please subscribe to the channel. And if there's any thoughts or comments on things you'd like me to talk about, please leave some comments in the comments below. And some of these brushes, at some point I will start to make a few of these available for free on the website. So if that's something you're interested in, I'll leave the link below. And then if you're able to do anything interesting with those, I'd be really interested to see what you're able to do. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you again soon.